There's this moment that happens to pretty much all of us. You're walking to your car, maybe rushing home from work, mentally ticking through your grocery list, and you suddenly just stop.
Right. Yeah, you just freeze.
Exactly. You stop dead in your tracks and just stare because the sunset is painting the clouds in these like ridiculous, vibrant shades of bruised purple and burning orange.
Oh, yeah.
And you stand there for a solid minute just looking at it. And it's like, why do you do that? What is the actual function of that moment? Or think about a song, right?
Yeah, music is a huge one.
Why does a specific sequence of invisible sound waves, which is literally just vibrating air hitting your eardrums, have the power to leave you completely speechless? Or even make you, pull the car over and cry?
Well, I mean, we take our reaction to those things as a given, right?
Yeah.
We just accept that some things make us feel this profound awe.
Right.
But underneath that feeling is this deeply complex mechanical puzzle. And it spans biology, psychology, and, heavy philosophy.
And solving that puzzle is basically our mission for this deep dive. Today, we are taking a massive stack of sources. We're talking evolutionary psychology research, aesthetic theory, and some of the most intense philosophical debates of the 18th century.
Oh, yeah, the 18th century got really heated about this.
They really did. And we're using all of that to unpack one of the oldest questions in human history. What actually is beauty? Does it exist out there in the physical world, woven into the sunset? Or is it entirely in the eye of the beholder?
And to figure that out, we really have to look at everything from the hardwired survival habits of our earliest ancestors all the way to the mysterious emotional grip of a sad piece of music.
Right. We need to dissect how the human mind actually processes the world. So before we get into the heavy philosophical theories, it seems like we probably have to start with the hardware, right?
Yeah, human biology.
Because if we want to know what beauty is, we first have to ask why a prehistoric caveman would have cared about it at all. I mean, survival back then was a full-time job.
It really was.
Yeah. Stopping to admire a pretty view just seems like a really good way to get eaten.
It does. But from an evolutionary psychology perspective, aesthetic preferences are not just these frivolous luxuries. They're actually ancient survival tools.
Okay, how so?
Well, you can see this really clearly in research regarding habitat choice. Anthropologists have run these fascinating studies where they show young children various types of landscapes.
Even kids who haven't been in nature.
Exactly. Even kids who have lived their entire lives inside a dense modern city and have never seen the wilderness. And overwhelmingly, they show a natural visual preference for savanna-like environments.
Like open grasslands with a few scattered trees?
Yeah, open grasslands, a visible water source, and a clear view of the horizon so you can spot predators. That is the exact environment where early humans evolved and thrived, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Right, right.
So when we look at a landscape like that today, our brain delivers a sense of deep pleasure. That pleasure is essentially a biological reward system.
Okay, so it's like an ancient real estate instinct kicking in.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Your brain is basically handing you a little hit of dopamine and saying, hey, this is a highly functional place to set up camp. You probably won't starve here.
Exactly. And that biological drive spills over into the things we create, too. We see this with Stone Age Acheulean hand axes.
Acheulean hand axes, those are the really old ones, right?
Yeah, they're essentially just sharpened rocks used for cutting meat or scraping hides.
Right.
But archaeologists found that early humans were spending massive amounts of extra calories and time to make these axes perfectly symmetrical.
Really?
Yeah, they were napping the flint into these beautiful, flawless teardrop shapes long before they were making cave paintings or, using them for religious symbols.
Well, why waste the energy? I mean, if a jagged rock cuts the meat just as well, making it symmetrical seems like a terrible use of calories during an ice age.
It does seem counterintuitive, but it comes down to something researchers call costly signaling.
Costly signaling. Okay.
Right. If you can spend all this extra time and energy making a hand axe visually stunning and perfectly balanced, you are signaling to the rest of the group, and specifically to potential mates, that you are highly capable.
Oh, I see.
You're basically saying, I am so strong, so skilled, and so well fed that I can afford to waste energy making my tools look good.
Wow. So an aesthetic preference for symmetry becomes completely intertwined with sexual selection. Recognizing beauty basically meant recognizing good genes and survival skills.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit. If our sense of beauty is just this hardwired survival instinct telling us an environment is safe or that a mate is genetically fit, why on earth do I love looking at terrifying, inhospitable things?
Oh,
I
right.
mean, people pay thousands of dollars to go stare at towering, jagged glaciers, or they stand on a cliff watching a chaotic, violent storm over the ocean. A hurricane screams, danger, not safe place to build a hut.
Oh, absolutely. And you are hitting on one of the most crucial fault lines in aesthetic philosophy right there. Yeah. Because the feeling you get looking at a flower-strewn meadow is not the same feeling you get looking at a hurricane.
Hmm.
And 18th century thinkers, particularly Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant, they spent years tearing this exact problem apart.
And what do they come up with?
They decided we actually need two completely different categories, the beautiful and the sublime.
Okay, so the meadow is beautiful, but the hurricane is sublime. What is the actual difference in how our brains process them?
Well, the beautiful charms us. It's small, smooth, orderly, and tied directly to pleasure and safety. Like a delicate seashell is beautiful, a neatly manicured garden is beautiful.
Right, very so.
But the sublime, on the other hand, moves us through a mixture of awe and horror. It involves vastness, darkness, ruggedness, and overwhelming power.
That definitely sounds like a hurricane.
Right. And Kant actually broke the sublime down into two specific types to explain the mechanics of why we enjoy it so much. The first is what he called the mathematical sublime.
Mathematical, meaning it has to do with, like, numbers or scale.
Scale is the absolute key here. It happens when we try to grasp the infinite. So imagine standing in the middle of a desert on a completely clear night, and you're looking up at the Milky Way.
Oh, I love that feeling.
You're seeing billions of stars, and your imagination tries to comprehend the sheer, crushing scale of the universe, and it completely fails. Your brain literally cannot picture a billion of anything.
Right, you just feel impossibly tiny.
Exactly. But while your imagination fails, your rational mind steps in and recognizes that failure. The very fact that you can conceptualize the idea of infinity, even if you can't visually picture it, elevates your intellect.
Oh, wow.
It reminds you that your rational mind is greater than your mere sensory perception. So you feel a thrill because your mind can reach beyond the limits of your physical eyes.
Okay, so the mathematical sublime is all about massive scale and infinity. What is the second type?
The second is the dynamical sublime, and this is your hurricane.
Ah,
It's the experience of witnessing the terrifying, destructive power of nature like an erupting volcano or a massive waterfall. But crucially, you are watching it from a place of physical safety.
I see. So it's the difference between being tossed around in a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the ocean during a squall
Right.
and standing inside a sturdy lighthouse watching those exact same waves crash against the glass.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Kant argues that the pleasure of the dynamical sublime comes from a profound psychological tension.
Tension. Yeah.
When you stand in that lighthouse, you realize your utter physical fragility. That storm could wipe your body out in a literal instant.
Right. Easily.
But because you were separated from the danger, that realization of physical weakness forces you to recognize your moral and rational superiority. The storm can crush your bones, but it cannot crush your mind, your free will, or your moral essence.
That's
The
incredible.
sublime forces us to confront our physical limits, which reveals what is limitless within us.
You know, it really reminds me of people getting into a shark cage.
Oh.
Like, you lower yourself into the freezing water with a great white shark. If you were just swimming out there naturally, you'd be in pure, agonizing terror.
Panic. Total panic.
But because there are 2 inches of steel between you and the shark, the terror turns into this exhilarating, life-affirming awe. You are safely flirting with your own destruction just to feel, undeniably alive.
Exactly. The barrier is what allows the aesthetic experience to actually happen. But notice what is doing the heavy lifting in that scenario.
What do you mean?
Well, the shark isn't trying to be beautiful. The storm isn't trying to be profound. Your mind is the thing taking the raw data of terror and converting it into pleasure.
Wow, okay, that raises a massive problem, doesn't it?
It does.
Because if my brain is the thing converting a terrifying storm into a profound experience, is beauty even a real property of the physical world at all? Or is it entirely just a subjective feeling rattling around inside my head?
And welcome to the core philosophical battleground. Historically, there are 2 main camps here. The objectivists believe beauty is a literal property of the physical world.
Like weight or height.
Exactly. The philosopher Francis Hutcheson argued that there is a specific physical ratio in objects that triggers our sense of beauty. He called it uniformity amidst variety.
Uniformity amidst variety. How does that actually work in practice?
Think of it like color. Physical light waves trigger your optic nerve so you see red. Hutchison believed this structural ratio triggers an internal sense of beauty in the exact same way.
Okay.
So a blank white square has uniformity, but it lacks variety, so it's boring. A random bucket of paint thrown at a wall has variety, but no uniformity, so it's just chaotic.
Right.
But a rose has intricate variety in the folding of its petals, but a uniform, mathematically organizing structure. That perfect balance mechanically triggers your internal sense of beauty.
But wait, if beauty is just a physical property of an object, like you said, like its weight, then everyone should agree on it.
You would think so.
Yeah. Right. Because we don't argue over whether a rock weighs 10 pounds. We can just weigh it. But think about it. My friends and I furiously disagree over whether certain movies or albums are masterpieces.
Oh, constantly.
If it's a physical property, why on earth do we argue over taste?
The philosopher David Hume saw that exact flaw. He argued that beauty is not a property of things at all. It is entirely subjective. It is just a feeling of pleasure in the observer. If the movie makes you feel good, it's beautiful to you.
But that creates the opposite problem. If it's entirely subjective, then literally anything goes. Like a crayon drawing by a toddler is objectively just as beautiful as the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, as long as the toddler's mom likes it. That feels wrong, too.
Right, and Hume recognized that. So he solved this with the concept of the standard of taste.
The standard of taste.
Yeah, he pointed out the durable admiration of great art. Think about the epic poems of Homer. They were written nearly 3,000 years ago in a completely different language for a completely different culture.
And yet we still read them.
Exactly. Human beings today still read them and find them profoundly beautiful. Hume argued that while taste is subjective, human biology and our sensibilities share a common underlying structure. Works that endure for centuries prove that some things universally appeal to the core of human nature.
Okay, so the fact that we all have similar, hardware means our subjective tastes will eventually align around true greatness over time.
Yes. And then Kant takes this a step further with a brilliant paradox. He called it the antinomy of taste.
Okay.
He says that when you judge something to be truly beautiful, you have to experience what he calls disinterested pleasure.
Disinterested? So I don't care about it.
You don't care about its utility. When you look at a painting of a bowl of fruit and call it beautiful, you aren't thinking about how much money you could sell the painting for.
Right.
You aren't thinking about eating the fruit to satisfy your biological hunger. You are completely stripped of all your biological appetites and personal biases. You are appreciating the form purely for its own sake.
So I'm just taking it in as a pure observer.
Yes. And because you are stripped of all your personal selfish interests in that specific moment, Kant says we naturally assume we are judging the object from a universal standpoint.
Oh, wow.
This explains why you get so genuinely offended when your friend hates your favorite movie. You aren't just saying, I personally enjoy this. You are implicitly putting that movie on a pedestal and demanding that everyone else agree with you. You speak as if its beauty is a cold, hard fact because you feel you've tapped into a universal truth.
That makes a lot of sense when we were looking at a physical object, like a painting or a rose. We can analyze the structure and the form, but, and this is a big but, how does any of this explain our reaction to something that has no physical shape at all? Like music.
Ah, music.
Right. We were talking about invisible patterns of sound waves. How can vibrating air trigger all of this deep philosophy?
Music is the great outlier. It breaks almost all the traditional rules of aesthetic philosophy. The 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer actually believed music was the highest of all the arts for this exact reason.
Higher than painting or architecture.
Yes. He argued that arts like painting, sculpture, and architecture merely copy the physical world. They're trapped in physical forms. But music is a direct presentation of what he called the will.
The will. What does he mean by that? It almost sounds like a mystical force.
For Schopenhauer, the will is the driving energy of reality itself. Think of it as a constantly running, relentless engine of human anxiety and desire.
Okay.
We always want something. We are hungry, so we want food.
Yeah.
We get food, and then we get bored. We want a better job, we get the job, then we want more money. It is an endless cycle of striving that inevitably leads to suffering and frustration.
Because we are never actually satisfied. The engine just keeps running in the background.
Right. But music bypasses the physical world of objects entirely. It is pure mathematical structure and movement. So when we listen to a brilliant symphony, the mathematical perfection of the music temporarily unplugs us from that engine of desire. We aren't striving for anything in that moment. The music just washes over us And for a brief few minutes, we are entirely liberated from the suffering of our own desires. We get a true glimpse of eternity.
But that raises a really tricky mechanical question about emotion. How can a piece of music be sad or anxious?
That's a huge puzzle.
Right. Think about Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings. It is famously incredibly devastating. You listen to it and you just want to weep. But a piece of music doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a heart. It can't literally feel grief. It's just cellos and violins. So how on earth does it transmit sadness to us?
Philosophers categorize this into a few competing theories. The first is the contagion or arousal theory. This suggests that music functions almost like a virus.
A virus.
Yeah. Have you ever walked into a room where two people were just having a terrible argument, and even though they aren't speaking anymore, you immediately catch that heavy, anxious mood?
Oh, absolutely. The tension is palpable. You can cut it with a knife.
The contagion theory argues that music does exactly the same thing. The acoustic properties directly stimulate your nervous system, bypassing your conscious thoughts completely, and literally infect you with a mood.
That's wild. What's the other theory?
The alternative is the imagination theory, sometimes called the persona theory. We hear the music as if it were a literal character like an unseen persona. We imagine the violin as a person pouring their heart out, and we feel empathy for that imagined person.
You know, I wonder if it's also physical mimicry. Like, when someone is deeply depressed, their body physically reacts, right? Their shoulders slump, their head drops, their movements become incredibly slow and heavy.
It's lethargic.
And when you listen to a sad piece of music, the melody usually droops downward, the tempo drags, the pitch falls. It feels like the music is physically doing what a sad human body does. It's almost like our brain has a musical mirror neuron.
That's a great observation. That physical resemblance is a profoundly powerful mechanism for transmitting emotion. But recognizing how music transmits sadness brings us to this weird psychological trapdoor known as the paradox of sad music.
The paradox of sad music, which is what exactly?
Well, think about your daily life. We go to extreme lengths to avoid feeling negative emotions.
We really do.
We don't want to feel grief or despair or terror. We actively try to fix things so we stop feeling that way. So why, when you are perfectly happy, would you voluntarily sit down in your living room and put on a heartbreaking piece of music?
Oh, it's the breakup song phenomenon.
Yeah.
If you just got dumped, you don't listen to happy pop music. You put on the most depressing acoustic ballad you can possibly find and just wallow in it. Why do we actively seek out the exact emotion we usually run from?
The philosopher Kendall Walton explains this by pointing out that we welcome the sorrow in music specifically because it lacks a regrettable real-world object.
Meaning, there is no actual tragedy attached to it in real life.
Exactly. If you feel profound grief in real life, it means you have suffered a terrible loss. You lost a job, or someone you love passed away. You have to pay a massive toll for that emotion.
Right.
But when you feel grief while listening to Barber's Adagio, you get to experience the sheer, breathtaking depth of the emotion without anyone actually dying. It provides a safe, contained sandbox.
I see.
We get to savor the complexity of human sorrow, understand it better, and even find solace in it, all from a place of complete, uncompromised safety.
So art and music give us this isolated laboratory to have these profound, transcendent emotional experiences. But and I keep thinking about this. How does any of this apply to a random Tuesday?
What do you mean?
Well, we aren't always listening to symphonies in a concert hall or staring at paintings in a museum. Most of life is just, commuting, working, and making dinner.
And this is exactly where aesthetic philosophy has to touch the ground of daily life. The American philosopher John Dewey heavily criticized what he called the museum concept of art.
The museum concept.
Yeah, he hated the idea that beauty is something locked away in fancy buildings with velvet ropes, completely cut off from the grit of daily living. For Dewey, aesthetics shouldn't just be about high art. It has to involve how we interact with our everyday environment.
Because if we restrict beauty to a museum, we essentially spend 99% of our lives completely numb.
Precisely. The thinker Martin Heidegger believed that the true function of art is to break us out of that numbness.
Yeah.
He argued that we usually walk through the world on functional autopilot.
Right.
You look at a shoe, and you don't see the leather or the craftsmanship. You just see a tool to protect your foot. You look at a coffee mug, and it's just a vessel to hold caffeine. But an aesthetic experience forces you to stop and recognize the concealed thingness of those objects.
A thingness.
Yeah, it reveals the physical weight, the history, and the reality of the world around you.
It's kind of like walking down the same street you walk down every single day, but suddenly noticing the way the street lamp reflects off a puddle in the rain. Or stopping to look at the intricate geometry of a spider's web on your porch. It's a sudden jolt of meaning.
Yes, and recognizing that beauty isn't just a fun visual exercise. It carries profound moral weight. Think about it. When you cultivate the ability to see the beauty in an ordinary object, you are recognizing its intrinsic worth.
Right.
And if you can recognize the intrinsic worth of a fragile spiderweb or a puddle, you are exercising the exact same mental muscle required to recognize the worth and vulnerability of other human beings.
That's beautiful. But I do have to push back a little on this idea of living in a state of constant wonder.
Oh, sure.
Because we cannot walk around crying over dewdrops every day. The novelist George Eliot has this incredible observation where she says that if we actually felt the roar of ordinary life, if we could literally hear the grass growing and the squirrel's heart beating, we would die of the noise.
It would be too much.
Yeah. She says we have to walk around wadded with stupidity just to get through the day. We need that functional autopilot so we can, remember to pay the rent and buy groceries.
And George Eliot is entirely correct. Biologically, our nervous systems simply cannot sustain a permanent state of aesthetic ecstasy. We would burn out instantly.
Right.
But that is exactly why the capacity for beauty is so vital. It serves as a necessary periodic wake-up call. It pierces through that protective wadding of stupidity just long enough to remind us that we are existing in a profoundly complex, staggering reality.
So if we pull all these threads together, what actually is beauty? It clearly isn't just one thing.
No, not at all. It is a massive, multifaceted mechanism. It starts as an ancient biological survival tool, guiding us towards safe habitats and strong mate.
Right, the savanna and the hand axes.
Exactly. Then it evolves into a psychological trigger that forces us to realize our own moral and rational superiority when we confront the terrifying scale of nature.
The sublime.
Yes. It is a deeply subjective internal feeling that magically demands universal agreement from everyone around us. And it acts as a safe, isolated mirror that allows us to explore our darkest, most complex emotions without paying a real-world price.
It is basically the mechanism that wakes us up. And before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own.
It's a good one.
We've talked a lot about the beauty of perfection today. The flawless symmetry of a hand axe, the mathematical perfection of a symphony, the grand scale of the starry night. But consider the aesthetics of decay.
Like the concept of patina. Thinkers like Octavio Paz have written beautifully about our strange fascination with antiques and handcrafted objects that clearly show their age. We often prefer objects that wear down, that tarnish, that develop a rich patina over time, rather than a perfectly preserved, sterile museum piece that never changes.
Yeah, think about a battered old leather jacket or an antique pocket watch where the brass is rubbed smooth by decades of being held. Why do we find that specific wear and tear so incredibly beautiful?
It's a great question.
Octavio Paz suggests it is because the object shares our timeline. A sterile museum piece is trapped in a vacuum, essentially pretending it will live forever. But the worn leather jacket accepts its own mortality.
Wow.
So the next time you hold something old, worn, and deeply beautiful, ask yourself, does its beauty lie in its physical perfection? Or does it lie in the fact that it shares your fate, wearing away little by little, teaching us how to live and, eventually, how to die?
That is such a profound reframing of what we choose to value in the physical world.
It really is. So the next time you find yourself stopping in your tracks in a grocery store parking lot to stare at a burning purple sunset, or you feel the hair on your arms stand up when the strings swell in your favorite song, you will know exactly how much history, evolutionary biology, and heavy philosophy is firing off inside your brain to create that single moment of awe.